I guess I realized I'm getting off of my desk. So I'll need to go ask for it. And when you're at home, you do.
No.
You have to call, email, they call you.
That's definitely not right, because it hasn't moved.
No.
All right, are we ready? All right. Well, on behalf of Northwood University, thank you for attending our interview panel session today, and thank you to our 4 human resource professionals for being here with us today. We are streaming online as well, so welcome to all of you who are online. So today we're going to just kind of have a discussion about interviewing, what sorts of questions our panel likes to ask during interviews, and what they're looking for in responses out of some of them. Before we begin with that, we'll start with introductions. So Emmy, I will start with you. If you want to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. My name is Emmy Hunt. I'm the HR manager at Cintas Corporation here in Midland. I work in the Midland office. I am a graduate from Northern Michigan University. I graduated from college 2 years ago, and I've been employed with Cintas since.
I'm Mark McCain. I'm from Gladby Auto Company in Bay City, Michigan. We have 2 dealerships. We have a Toyota dealership and we have a Cadillac Buick GMC dealership as well. I've been in HR for about 12 years and I am a Northwood alum.
And I'm Lori Eisenhart. I'm the director of HR here at Northwood University. I am a Northwood alum, and I've been with Northwood for 32 years. Well, the whole time in HR, not as a director. I worked up to that position, but from Midland originally. And just love Northwood.
Hi, I'm Crystal Wright. I'm from Frankenmuth Insurance. I'm an HR partner. I spent over 20 years in Illinois in a nonprofit business sector and was hired when I moved back to Michigan in October of 2021. And I primarily support 3 departments there at Frankenmuth Insurance and also our subsidiary company out in Maine called Patriot Insurance. And I'm a graduate of Saginaw Valley State University.
All right, well, thank you again all for joining us today. So the first couple of questions that I'm going to ask you to talk about are resumes. So with regards to resumes, is there something that really stands out when you look at a resume when you're reviewing candidates? Crystal, I'll start with you.
Yeah, when I look at resumes, primarily what I'm looking for are similar skill sets to what I'm looking to fill that position for. I think some of the other things that stand out are when things are in order, right, and they kind of go together, things that I wouldn't probably move forward are errors on the resume, like spelling errors or a lot of different fonts being used or just not very organized. So cover letters are always a positive as well. Usually gives me a gauge of why the person's interested in the position.
Lori, if you want to.
I would agree with all that, and I also like to look for good flow, something that's eye-catching, not necessarily a lot of graphics or busyness, but just something that's easy to read and understand and follow. It's really helpful if it's concise, but you use some descriptive type words that kind of jump out and help me, determine whether or not you feel you are fit for the job.
At Gladby, we have many different positions, everything from car detailers to accounting to financial and insurance managers. Depending on the position, we might have anywhere from 25 to 50 people applying. It's very difficult for me to be able to go through 50 resumes and look at them down to the final piece. So at the beginning of the resume, a summary of your skills, if that's customer service, if it's financial, anything you have that you've used in the past. That woke me up. Sorry about that. So any of your skills in the past that would relate to that position in the beginning, and then 3 topics will catch my eye and be able to get you to that next step, which would be a phone screen.
So just mimicking what everyone said, the positions that I typically recruit for is our management trainee program. So that's a program tailored to recent college graduates. You don't have to have a particular major or necessary skill set. So I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily looking anything particular when it comes to job history or anything like that. I make everything, clear and concise. I'm also looking for like longevity in jobs and things like that to move forward.
Thank you. So do you review all resumes that come through? Do you use ATS or applicant tracking systems? What is your process? Mark, if you want to start.
Yeah, we use Hirology, so it's a recruitment platform that we post all of our jobs on. It holds all of our candidate information. We have technically 3 different businesses within Lavity Auto Company. It gives us the ability to be able to go through those candidates, be able to look at the resumes, be able to see if they meet the minimum requirements. The 3 big things is always attach your resume, even if it has you go through and the application and put in each of your jobs, and always attach that resume. That's going to set you aside from other candidates that are applying for the position. Also, it helps to be able to get your top candidates into one platform. If we're hiring for a sales position, we might have 50 candidates. The top 10 will go on to a phone screening, and then maybe the top 4 to a in-person interview. So it's vitally important to be able to fill out everything that an employer is asking you to fill out.
Lori, anything to add?
So we use NeoEd, which is a system, same type of thing, as Mark mentioned, that helps gather everything so everybody can apply online and agree, and also upload your resume, cover letter, information that you feel is relevant, and that helps with the screening process. So HR doesn't do all of the screenings, managers typically, because they're involved in the initial determination as far as when they want to go ahead and interview, but we do help them with reviewing that if they need.
Crystal?
Our applicant tracking system is Dayforce, so similar in terms of you're going to apply online. Each one of our HR partners does review those resumes, and then we determine who to move forward to the managers for their review. So oftentimes there's candidates that may not even move out of the HR review bucket, but we don't use any type of artificial intelligence for those reviews or any type of other tracking. It's just essentially us reviewing them based on kind of what we think would be a good fit for that role.
Thank you. And Emmy, with Cintas being a larger corporation nationwide, what is your process for that?
Yeah, so similar process. I review every application that comes in to move forward to a screening interview. We don't use AI or anything like that, or resume sorting system. So it's all done by myself and the recruiting team that goes through all of the applications and resumes that come in.
So this is always a big question. Resumes, 1 page or 2. When is it appropriate to have a 2-page resume? Crystal, I'll start with you at this end.
That's a great question. I would prefer a 1 page, especially I'm the one reviewing them all. But clearly, if you have a lot of information that you can't kind of get down to 1 page and make it kind of read well and be cohesive. I mean, again, we're not looking for you guys are all young, you're all in college, but we're not looking for 20 years of experience on a resume. Essentially, the last 10 years is probably the most that you want to give. So 1 page is preferable, but at the same time, I don't look at a 2-page resume and say, oh no, they're not going to be a potential good candidate for the role.
Lori?
I would agree, and it depends on the position too. I mean, we could have faculty that would apply and it may be 2 or 3 pages because of their experience. So it really just depends on the job. But obviously with 1, if it's concise and easy to read and has the information that's necessary, that's going to help with that screening process.
I think formatting's, like Lori says, the best thing. If you have your resume formatted correctly, if you have a 2-page resume because you have that experience, you want to put it on there, that's fine. I'm looking at positions that relate to the position you applied for, and then anything in the past that would relate over to whatever you applied for as well. So if you have something 15 years ago that you did that would relate, you want that on there. That's why it's important at the beginning to have that summary. Where are your skills? What are you able to do?
I'm the same. I don't necessarily have a preference if it's 1 page or 2. If you have that much job experience that you want to tell me about that it fits on 2 pages, by all means, go ahead and put it on 2 pages. But again, just the clear and concise formatting is always preferable.
So how do you respond, or do you even respond to every candidate that applies for the position? Emmy, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I don't personally respond to every candidate that applies, but every candidate does get a response. So all of our applications are online applications. So after I review the application, if that's a candidate I'm not going to move forward with, once I make that determination in our online system, it automatically generates a letter that that candidate will not be moving forward.
We don't respond to every candidate that applies. If we post a sales position, we might get 100 candidates. When it gets narrowed down to the top 20, they might be phone screened. Anyone that phone screens or comes in for a personal interview will get an email back from us as a company thanking them for taking the time to apply, do the phone screening, or do the in-person interview. But if you didn't make it through that first round, we don't respond back.
And ours does automatic replies when you first submit, so you know that it was received. And then as it goes through the process, things are updated in the system. So if you went out to check, it would tell you like at what place it's at as far as interviewing or not, if the job is closed. And then the manager will usually, if you're selected to interview, then the manager is going to do any communication after that.
And that's similar to ours as well. In terms of what Lori just said, they're going to get a response when they apply right away that says if you're selected for an interview, then you will be contacted. But then after that, we don't then reach out to each applicant and say, we've moved forward with other candidates. We just kind of leave it at that point. We don't let them know if they're not qualified. We just essentially do the thanks for applying. We've received your application. We will contact you should you be selected.
So the next question will be around like the type of interview. Do you prefer to interview virtual, over the phone, in person, a panel interview? Is it a combination? Crystal, how do you start the process?
Yeah, that's a great question for us. We are a work from anywhere environment at Frankenmuth Insurance. So about 94% of our employees work remotely. Many don't even live in the state of Michigan. So primary way that we interview is either over the phone or virtual. So as the HR partner, I'm going to phone screen every candidate that's been selected for an interview. And then if selected for a second round interview, we do those over WebEx, the WebEx platform. So I guess, my preference is to do the phone interview just because that's what I have done over the last 2.5 years. And that's what's best for the company.
Lori, anything to
So we've kind of done all. We've started with some first round, sometimes virtually, and then have from that pool or from that grouping narrowed it down and then have the candidate come in person. There are times when the manager will just do the interviewing, and then I usually follow up on the phone. There's a section that I'm responsible for in determining if you're a good fit with our culture, if you align with our philosophy. So it really depends on the situation.
We do both. All of our process starts with once you're selected for a phone screening, I call and do a phone screening. At that point, it's more me telling the candidate about what the position is, the hours, the pay, benefits, everything about our company, and then followed up with a couple simple questions. And the first one is, if you're currently working, where are you working? What are you doing? And then past positions. What past positions would apply to this one? It gives the candidate a chance to talk about if they have any questions on pay, or maybe they didn't read the posting fully. They may not be interested anymore, depending on the position, going through that phone screening. So we're not wasting time having them come in for an in-person interview. If you move on from that, we take 4 or 5 candidates to an in-person interview with that manager. So at that time, the candidate comes in, I go get them from our lobby, and they sit with our manager for an in-person interview. In the dealership world, it's vitally important that the manager sits with them in person because of that customer service. Every one of our positions are customer service focused at Lavity and taking great care of our customers. So we think it's important that we do face-to-face interviews.
Yeah, we have a very similar process with the first step from myself being that phone screening, and more so aimed at are you still interested in the position, things of that nature, with a couple basic questions. And then following that, it's a mixture of in-person and virtual. Most of our positions have a 3 to 4 step interview process, starting with the phone screen, and then it goes to an in-person interview. And then typically the final interview is a virtual interview on Zoom or Teams, some platform like that.
Thank you. When asking a candidate, tell me about yourself, what is it that you're looking for? Emmy, do you want to start?
Yeah, I don't think I'm necessarily looking for anything in particular, honestly. Whatever you want to tell me about, I'm happy to learn about you. I'm definitely looking to have a conversation with you. I love when the interview feels like you and I are having a conversation. So I just want to get to know you, whatever you want to tell me about, honestly.
That's how I start all the interviews when we do them, is tell me about yourself. And there's no right or wrong answer. You're just trying to build a relationship with the candidate, and that candidate's build an interview with the manager, myself, so you guys can talk freely. If you talk about your hobbies, or you talk about what you like to do on your free time, or your education or your experience, it's fine. You're just trying to open up that communication and build a relationship so you can have a good conversation throughout that interview.
And I think too, it helps put you at ease, kind of like Mark said, so that you're not maybe quite as nervous, and it may help with the connection, especially to see how you talk about yourself. I think that's probably one of the most uncomfortable things some people have. Maybe they're not comfortable in talking about themselves. So it's interesting to see the dynamics of their personality and how they relate. If they, are looking you in the eye, that can tell you a lot about the person.
I would agree. It's one of my first questions that I ask to all candidates. So it's kind of opening up the floor to be more personal, conversational, to get to know more about them, and kind of making them feel at ease as we go through the next series of questions.
So to tie into that a little bit, we always talk about keep everything professional, don't talk, too personal through the interview. How much do you want or don't want with regards to that? Because tell me about yourself, you want to get a little bit more personal with them. So where's the line? Crystal, you want to start with that?
I guess that's a tough one. Some people can tell you a lot in that conversation, and others maybe not so much. I think if it tends to get too long and drawn out, like maybe over 5 to 10 minutes, you're probably talking too much about a personal item that's going on in your life. But I agree, like hobbies, what your interests are, kind of keeping it conversational, but not sharing your life story, so to speak. And it's always nice to share if they share about their professional background, like these are the things I've been doing over the last so many years. That's nice as well. But if it's more personal that you're talking about, I would say keeping it more to maybe your interests and your likes, but not like, I don't know. I just think of some of the conversations I've had with people, and they get into like more serious matters that aren't necessary for an interview process.
Go ahead,
I
Mark.
would agree. I would agree.
Stay away from medical conditions. You don't have, and we all know as HR professionals, we can't ask those questions. We can't stop any candidate from telling us things in the interview. And doing this 12 years, people will tell you a lot of different things that have no bearing on you being able to perform that job. So stay away from any medical conditions. Stay away from, you don't have to share if you have a family or any of that. That's not important. That does not disqualify you from being able to do the position you're applying for. you do want to keep it light, but you also want to try to, like I said earlier, build that relationship with the interviewer. So hobbies are safe. What do you do in your free time? Exercising, whatever brings a passion to you. I want to see someone have passion about that position. I have passion working at Lavity Auto Company. I love going into my job every day. It took me 12 years, but here I am. I want to see some kind of passion out of you. What do you enjoy to do in your free time, or where does that passion come from?
Yeah, I agree. Just tell me about anything you're passionate about, anything that excites you that you can passionately speak about. That's going to give me an idea of who you are as a person, is what I want to hear about.
All right, so we talk a lot about behavioral or situational questions. What is your favorite question to ask a candidate and why? Who wants to start?
I can start this
Okay.
one. So I think my favorite situational based question to ask is, tell me about a mistake you recently made at work and what did you do to fix it? And I like this question because I think it's a little bit of an untraditional question, right? Like, tell me about something you did wrong, which is something we don't often want to talk about in an interview. But I'm really looking for, what was that follow-up from you and what did you do to fix that mistake, essentially. It tells me a lot about your work ethic and how you're going to be as an employee.
One of my main ones is customer service because of how important it is in our dealerships. I like to know, tell me about a time you provided great customer service. You'll get some candidates that don't know how to answer that. And they might say, I worked in a job where I wasn't customer facing. I'm in a job that I'm not customer facing, but your customers change. My customers are our employees, and for all of us, our employees, our managers, our ownership team. So you always have a customer. It just depends on if it's front facing, someone buying something from you, or someone that you're taking care of at work. So I'd really like to always find out if they realize that customers can change and how you provide that great customer service.
And I agree with both of those are good. Another might be conflict. If you've had a situation with coworker or maybe a manager, maybe you didn't see eye to eye on something, maybe how you handled that. I think that shows a lot in your forward thinking, problem solving, how to be collaborative. Obviously, not everyone's going to agree 100% of the time. And the bottom line is to be able to work together as a team and get to the final result, whatever that might be. So it's really important, I think, to show how you build those skills with your team, who you're going to be working with, or if it's customer service and you have a customer that's being very difficult, how you handle that. So just that thought process of what's important to you and being able to handle a situation like that.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those as well. I recruit for quite a few customer service type positions. We have very high standards at Frankenmuth Insurance. So one of my probably top questions that I ask people is when working with customers, what are 3 things that you like most? Kind of gauge it, how they interact with customers. And then I always follow up with that retrospect question. What are things that they like least when working with customers? So it kind of gives you an idea of what they think of a customer, and if they're frustrated, maybe how they're going to react when there's a tough situation that comes about.
Great ideas, thank you. What are some typical questions you might ask a candidate to ensure that they're a good fit with your team or with your company culture? Lori, do you want to start this one?
Sure. So again, this kind of goes back to one of my piece in the interview process and the regular interview process is to find out how the candidate aligns with our philosophy. So students here know the Northwood idea. It's what we're founded on. It's our mission. It permeates through our strategic plan. So it's really important that when they understand, and we do give them some guidelines ahead of time online where they can do an online course for free. There's information out on our public webpage about the Northwood idea. And then, of course, the manager, if they've already interviewed, we want to make sure that they've had that conversation with the employee. And then just to explain, this is what our philosophy is. This is how we utilize it in our operations, how we follow our mission, how we goal set everything is all in line with that Northwood idea. So I may take a piece of it, the individual freedom and responsibility, and how do they align with that? Do they have an example that they can give? And how do they feel about the Northwood idea? Do they, you don't have to agree 100%, but obviously you want to align with it because at the end of the day, all of our students that are here are learning about this and going out in the world and being global leaders, and we want to be supportive of that. So it's very important to us as an organization that everyone align with that. So I think that's really important to find out how the candidate feels.
In our phone screenings, we talk about Labadie Auto Company history and where we started, where we've come to, and how we got there. We're on our third generation family owner, Mark Labadie, and we've gotten there through providing great customer service and building that relationship in Bay City and the surrounding cities. So I do go into detail about how we got there, how we did it, in the customer service piece that we've already talked about. So it gives the candidate a chance to know we are family owned and operated. We have 180 employees, and even though we're growing and we're getting bigger by the month, by the year, we still treat it like when it started and there was 15 employees working for Lloyd Labadie in Bay City. So it just gives them an idea of the kind of attention you'll get when you work there and help solve some issues if you have any, and be able to grow as an employee.
Yeah, similarly, so I always like to ask candidates, what do you know about Cintas? You either get the candidates who did a plethora of research beforehand, which I love, or you get the candidates that say, I have no idea what your company is. I just saw the posting and I applied, which both are okay. And so I love to know, what do you know about our company? With Cintas, one of our biggest driving factors for success is our company culture. Similarly, that's something that Cintas is really proud of. And doing basic research of Cintas, what is it like to be an employee at Cintas? What is it like to work for Cintas? That's what you're going to hear about is our company culture. So following that up, I always like to ask, why do you want to work for Cintas? What drew you to this position, to this company, to this opportunity? Because I want to know what you're interested in. Are you bought into, I want to work for a company with great culture? And how does that align with you as a candidate?
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I oftentimes ask people what they know about the company, why they're interested in it. Of course, now that I'm recruiting for people outside of even the local Frankenmuth community, I have to tell them about Bronner's, and we filmed a Hallmark Christmas movie here, but clearly our culture is caring, commitment, teamwork would be our core values. So we really look towards questions that are surrounding those values, like what do you find difficult about being a member on a team, and see how people answer it. Or another one would be I think I said, I'm looking here. Have you ever felt overworked or overwhelmed in your position? And what do you do to keep track of all the items that you have to get done? Because that's part of that commitment, right? And then, being part of that team and caring for one another, picking up the slack if you have a coworker that's off work, so to speak. But I would agree with Emmy that, finding out why they're interested in our company. I will tell you, we have very good ratings online. So those people that do the research prior to the interview are usually oftentimes telling me, it's, because I've read about employees that work for you and they really like the culture, they really like working there. Can you tell me more about that? So always happy to give them that insight and those things, why people want to work for us.
Great, thank you. So body language can make a lasting impression, and not just in person, but virtually as well during virtual interviews. So talk to me a little bit about things that you look for, maybe some positives and negatives around that. Somebody wants to start?
Yeah, I can start us off. As far as virtual interviews, just because an interview is virtual, please still dress professionally as you would for an in-person interview, right? I think the other thing is, being mindful of what's in the background of your virtual interview. I've definitely seen some crazy things in virtual interviews in the background, so be mindful of that. As far as body language in an in-person interview, present yourself professionally, sit up straight. I love a handshake if you're able, a smile, eye contact. Like I said previously, I love when an interview feels like you and I are just catching up, having a conversation more so than me interviewing you. So yeah, just having professional, but, friendly body language as well, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree completely. Eye contact's a big one. Whoever you're interviewing with is make sure you make that eye contact with them so they know, number one, you're listening to them, but number two, you're engaged in that conversation.
I would agree with that too. And also make sure your equipment's working. You might want to test it ahead of time, like is the mic working, is the camera working? Make sure when you first engage with them online that you are, making that eye contact, smile, try and sound, positive. Your voice, you don't want to monotone, you want to sound interested, so that you can really engage with that person. And be careful using mute, because we all have been that where we've accidentally and we're talking and everyone's like, I can't hear you. So those little things that sometimes, and if you can find a quiet place. So hopefully you don't have a lot of background noise, dogs barking or, the cat walking in front of the screen, that kind of thing. Try and keep those things in mind.
Using that in the virtual interviews, using the background that's supported through whatever program you're using is always nice. Then you don't have to worry about what's behind you. Also, in the virtual interviews, it's so important to kind of wait until they're finished asking the question before you start to answer, because there is that little delay. It just can come across kind of hard to understand what you're trying to say. If your connection speed is slow or delayed, then that really affects the interview from running smoothly. One of the things I do, since I do primarily phone interviews, I do always tell candidates if they've never used WebEx and don't know how it works, I'm happy to practice with them so that they can ensure that when they're getting ready to meet with the hiring managers, that they're online, it's working appropriately, their microphone works. Some of the things on a phone interview, one of the number one things for me is answer the phone when we've scheduled a time for me to call you. Again, no background distractions or noises or kids in the background that you're trying to correct or wrangle together. That's always helpful. And then I just had feedback from managers, whether it's a virtual interview, an in-person interview that we do very infrequently. When candidates smile, they can kind of sense that things go a little bit smoother and calmer. We know that you're nervous and you don't know what kind of questions you're going to be asked, but smiling through it is definitely something that they've seen kind of help people calm down and get through those questions.
Thank you. Part of the interview process is always to have the candidate ask you questions at the end of the interview as well. What are some of the best questions that you've had candidates asked? And is there a specific question you always hope the candidate will ask? Crystal, you want to start?
Sure. I guess some of the best questions that people ask me is why I like to work at Franklin with Insurance. It gives me an opportunity to tell them about all the good things about the company. And why, I think it's a great place for them to work. And it kind of takes it up, it off of themselves and puts it back on what's the value of the company and why do I want to work here? So I think that's a great question.
And I would agree with that. Also, because they usually know how long I've worked here, when I've introduced myself, they'll say, what's kept you at Northwood for so long or why? And so I think that's always a good question. It kind of shows that they remember, they're listening, and two, it kind of puts it back on me, the interviewer, instead of all the pressure on them. Another thing would be, just in what are the next steps? How long is the timeline? Just to show that interest of, that you are interested in the position and interested in knowing when those decisions may be made.
Ask questions about the company. Do your research before you go in. Find out what that company does. Where the revenues are coming from. Be able to ask intelligent questions at the end of there that shows that you're engaged and you've done your research before you came in there. Everyone up here said, I do enjoy when they ask me why I enjoy working there. There's nothing more exciting than being able to talk about that for me. But have some questions ready because every interviewer at the end is going to ask you if you do have any questions. And I think you said, what's that timeline look like? Just so you know, we always give a timeline. We'll say a week, or we're still doing interviews. It might be 2 weeks. It's usually longer than that. It always turns out we've got to do a couple more interviews or whatever the case is. So just be prepared for questions so you can engage with that interviewer at the end of the interview.
As well as everyone had set up here, but I love at the end of an interview where I feel like you're vetting me as much as I'm vetting you as a candidate. I love when your questions, really, I feel like you're trying to see if this is a good fit for you as much as I'm trying to see if you're a good fit for Cintas. So almost it's like the opportunity for now you to interview me, right? So I love when the questions are, maybe tailored to you, like how could I fit into the company, more so than the cookie cutter surface level questions.
Great, thank you. And with regards to follow-up, how do you want a candidate to follow up with you and how timely? Emmy, do you want to start?
Yeah. Again, I don't think I have a really strong preference. I definitely enjoy it when candidates do follow up. When I get an email, hey, thank you for interviewing me today. Like here's additional contact information, something like that. I don't think I have a preference really on the timeliness. I'd say probably the sooner is the better. If you email me, weeks or months after our interview, I'm probably saying, who is this? So I'd say the timelier the better. But in whatever format, if you want to give me a phone call, if you want to send me an email, or if you don't follow up, I think that's okay too. I don't really think I have a preference either way.
By the time the candidate comes in and they meet with me and the manager, they have all my information. So you have my email, you have my company cell, you have my work or my office phone number. After you come in for that in-person interview, I would say 24 to 48 hours, you want to send a thank you email, just letting the interviewer know and the manager, thank you for taking the time to be able to interview. And then add something in there that you may not have known about the company or something that made you excited about that position in there. It doesn't have to be long. A couple sentences is good, but what it does is it refreshes our memory as well. We might be doing 5, 6 interviews and who knows how many other jobs we have posted. But those emails are always nice to see that you're engaged and you are interested in that position. I will get phone calls within 24 hours, and we're always very clear on our timeline. If they tell you it's going to be a week, you can send a thank you email, but wait that good week before you call or before you find out, because the employer is trying to pick the best candidate as much as you're trying to pick the best company to work for.
I would totally agree with that. I don't think I'd add anything.
Yeah, I know, I would agree 100% with
Yeah.
both. And I'm with Emmy. I don't really have a preference either way. It's great, but not necessary either. But it does show that you're very interested and that you appreciate the time that we took to interview you.
So we're going to open it up for student questions if any of you have questions. But before we do so, is there any last minute tips that you want to share in regards to interviewing or what maybe a candidate could expect? What are the process?
I think you said it on the last question is when you ask, do you have any questions? That's your time to be able to ask the interviewer about the company, what they like, what they don't like. As much as it's the employer's job to interview the candidates, it's your job to make sure that company is going to be the right fit for you. If you have red flags in an interview with the interviewee, maybe questions they ask or the culture that they have there or whatever the case is, it's probably not going to change after you start. You've got to make that best decision for you as much as the company has to choose the best candidates. So keep that in mind when you get to ask those questions.
And that being said, I would say, going along with that, if you get through an interview and you hear something that maybe is a red flag for you, don't be afraid to pull yourself out of the interview process. I have so much respect for candidates that maybe send me an email or give me a phone call or even in the interview say, hey, you know what, I just, at the end of the day, this price or this salary doesn't line up with my expectation, these hours, this this format doesn't line up with my expectation. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we all appreciate that. You're saving us a lot of time at the end of the day. So don't be afraid to pull yourself out if you need to.
And don't be afraid to ask questions, again, or clarification on something. There's a lot of information going back and forth and, that you're being asked and sometimes, but it does, show too, if you're listening well. So even if there's something you want to follow up on, again, don't be afraid to ask the question.
Thank you. Anything else, Crystal?
Nope.
You're good. All right.
I would
So
agree.
Steve will allow you to ask questions if anybody has anything they want to ask our panelists.
Any questions?
What would be like one of your guys' biggest like red flag for someone who's coming to an interview where you're just instantly like turning them down after they say or do something right away and just like completely just turns you guys off from the whole interview process as a whole?
Being late. We set up a 9 o'clock interview and you roll in at 9:01. I've got our managers to realize that being 15 minutes early is not a thing anymore. But if you come in after that interview, we're not going to interview you. It's not going to happen. We give a lot of leeway and let them know I had an emergency. I'm going to be 15 minutes late because that may make it better, but you got to be on time.
I think going along with that, I think the biggest thing for me is throughout the interview process, if I feel like I'm having to like pull the answers out of you after I'm asking the question, and the interview is just really clunky going along, I think that's a red flag for me as well.
Yeah, trying to follow up with candidates and not getting a response back. Our applicant tracking system now has the ability to text. Not really 100% a fan of that, but I have used it for some of my summer positions for interns and student associates because I know that's the world. But if I call you or I email you, a response back is so important because then I'm going to go with another candidate, right? If I have two candidates we're just kind of on the fence with, I'm probably going to pick the one that's going to call me back and respond for sure.
And I know you probably heard, dress for the job that you want. That's true. It's important if you're coming in the interview that you look well put together. It shows that you take pride in yourself and you want to put forth a good first impression. So I think that's always important too.
Good evening. Thank you for your time today. My question is that tell me something about yourself is the first question and the most common question which is asked. And mostly people will tell you about their past experiences, but how can we make it better? I mean, how do we make ourselves, sound different than the others so that we get picked up?
I've had multiple interviews with companies. I've not gotten jobs. And with that being a question that I've been asked many times during interviews is tell me about yourself. I always started off, I'm an avid NASCAR fan. I love NASCAR. I grew up with it. We've camped in the infields all over the United States in a motorhome for NASCAR. It's an icebreaker. It gives the interviewer a chance to know a little bit more about me, and rarely is someone else a NASCAR fan, but every now and then it does work where someone else is passionate about NASCAR and then you can connect with that. That's really, if anyone asks me, tell me about yourself, that's the big one is NASCAR is a huge part of my life and it always has been and always will be.
Say just pick something you're passionate about, whatever it may be, as long as that passion shows. And then me as an interviewer, it's an icebreaker, right? And so I'm always going to try to relate to that to ease the anxiety a little bit. So if I can tell you're passionate about something, that's always going to stick in my mind.
So in your professional experience, when you weren't the interviewer, you were the interviewee, have you made a mistake within your interviews and kind of how did you handle that or bounce back or how did you fix that or reflect on it later on?
That is a really good question. I think, for me, I had been in Illinois and I was looking to relocate back to Michigan, had applied to several positions. And during that time, a lot of those interviews were virtual. So I think, my initial couple first interviews were definitely different because it had been a long time since I interviewed. I didn't know what kind of questions they were going to ask. And I just remember one of the positions I was very interested in, thinking that I was probably in the running, was a great candidate, and got no response back. Even after they said, this is when we'll follow up with you, there was no response. So then when I had to reach out, it was essentially, well, we're filling some other positions. We haven't decided on if we're going to fill this role. And I remember being very defeated and feeling like, did I do something wrong? And she's like, no, you didn't do anything wrong. It was just a matter of, we made a decision on our end to take some time to not fill this role at this position at this time. So then the next school that I applied to, being very excited again about the role, what I would be doing. And as we went through the interview, I felt like every answer that I gave, it was a panel interview, and there were a lot of people, they weren't even interested in what I was saying. So I got the sense of they probably already had an internal candidate that they were very interested in, but they were going through the motions of interviewing external candidates. So again, it feels a little defeating, but don't give up. As he said, he has hundreds of people apply for positions. So do I. It's almost like you have to be at the right place at the right time. And then when you're being interviewed, just tell about yourself, because you don't want to work for a company if you're not able to be yourself, right? You want to use the skills and the abilities that you have. You want to feel like the culture is the right fit. So don't give up. Keep trying. There's lots of positions that are out there. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but.
I overthink everything. So when I leave an interview, I feel like I've done everything wrong. What could I have answered better? What could I have done better? But it also, everyone makes mistakes daily. It's not about making the mistake. It's about learning from that mistake and being better for next time. So I think about part of making a mistake during an interview, if I'm interviewing someone, or it shows that you're human. And if you can rebound from that and finish out strong with your interview, it gives that interviewer a chance to see you be able to work through that. So don't let it, you just move on.
I think, with that being said, 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to know you made a mistake, right? You'll know that you made that mistake, and you may overthink it. I probably didn't even notice that you made the mistake, to be honest. And I'd also say keep in mind that not every interview goes the way you thought it would, if that makes sense. So to give an example, when I was interviewing for my current role with my current boss, I thought I bombed the interview. I left the interview and I called my family and I said, that was awful. Worst interview I've ever had. I didn't get the job. And now me and my boss joke about it all the time. He's like, what are you talking about? It was a great interview. But again, I thought I bombed it, right? So 9 times out of 10, we're not even going to notice the mistake that you thought that you made.
Push yourself for those jobs too. If you're pushing yourself for jobs that you think are above your qualification level, you're going to make mistakes in the interview, but know that you're going for something that you want to go for, and just learn from it.
We have a question from online, or somebody who's listening in the classroom. And that is, if you're self-employed or if you have a gap in your resume, how do you treat that as a potential person to interview? Is that a big deal, or as long as they have their resume stuff, are they still going to get an interview? So either gaps in their resume or they're self-employed.
I personally don't care, right? I think a resume doesn't tell the whole story. I think there's a lot that you don't put on a resume that may explain that gap or self-employment or what be it. I use a resume as a really loose guide. I'm more interested as you as a person versus your resume. So I think if you have an explanation for it, walk me through it, we can have that conversation, but it's not something by any means that I look at a gap on a resume and it goes in the shredder. That's not anything like that.
I think gaps in resumes is a thing of the past. I remember my second job, I left to just go to school, and I remember my dad telling me, well, what are you going to tell employers about that gap in your resume? And I was like, that I'm in school? I don't know. What's the difference?
Yeah.
But I don't look at gaps in resumes because it's just our society's changed so much. There's so much you can do either through making money outside of like a corporation or a business that it doesn't matter anymore.
And it may depend on the job too, that you're, there may be, if someone was in, say, higher ed and there was a gap, we would probably just ask, what the explanation was for that, depending. I think self-employment's, that's always a good thing to share. I mean, it shows a lot of responsibility and initiative and ambition, things like that. So I don't think you should ever be afraid to bring it up. There are people that, moms that decide to stay at home and, take care of their kids for a period of time or go back to school. So I don't think it's a red flag necessarily, but certainly it's something you can still share.
Yes, I would agree with all of that they have said as well. We do have a questionnaire as part of our application process that does ask if there's any gaps in your resume, if they wanted to share additional information as to why. But again, just because they put something in there doesn't necessarily, or don't put anything in there, doesn't necessarily mean I'm not going to then interview them for a position.
Other questions, students? Oh,
So I know you talked about like researching the company before the interview. Like, what type of things should we look at when researching the company?
Yeah, I think, anything that really stands out to you about the company, something that interests you, something that resonates with your interests, your passions, maybe career-wise, what you want to do, that you found interesting about the company. By no means am I expecting you to know, every little detail about the company, right? But I'd say high-level overview, what we do, and like what really stands out to you.
For Labadie Auto Company, the two main things I want you to do, I expect our candidates to know that we have two separate dealerships in Bay City and that we're in Bay City. You'd be surprised at how many people I ask them, do you know what kind of cars we sell? We sell 4 brands. It's not hundreds of brands that they don't know. Or they don't know we have 2 dealerships. They have no idea where we are in Bay City. It's just the little things that can make that interview go better, that you know about the company.
I agree in terms of some of those things as well. We've been in business longevity wise over 155 years. So I think that's one of the things when people Google us that stands out. So if somebody's recognizing that, I think that's great. But I have no problems giving more history and information about the company if people haven't done the research either. It is great. I think it's a positive if they have that background. If they don't, that's okay as well.
We like to ask too, like how did you hear about us? A lot of times it's because of maybe they were a student here, or their parent was, or somebody they knew worked here, that type of thing. We're in a smaller town, so we're kind of known in this area, but it's always interesting to find out, especially if the person was out of state or something, how did they find out about Northwood University?
have time for like 2 more questions.
So in order to shortlist the candidates to your job, like you have hundreds of applications, like how much you rely on the AI tools in order to shortlist the candidates for your job? Like how much AI play the role in shortlisting the candidates to you?
Yeah, I don't use any type of AI. I look at each one of my resumes individually.
Okay.
There are other more challenging or more difficult positions for me to fill that I will post directly on LinkedIn. And I still go through all of those candidates as well. I feel like sometimes you never know who's going to apply and what's out there. But I know that that's the future, right? That's where we're being pushed to kind of count on those keywords and the AI intelligence to kind of make our jobs more efficient. I still think it takes the personal aspect out of it, but that's just my thought process on it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Some of our process is AI driven, but I want to see those resumes where someone wants to grow with the company, especially a sales position. Someone may not have that sales experience, but everyone's attending Northwood here. This is a very well-known college or university here in mid-Michigan. That's more important to me than you having 4 years of sales experience or even car sales experience. So that's what the AI might drive away from it, depending on how you set it up. It's a lot easier for me to go in and look for people that want a career, not just a job.
That's a good point.
One more question? Anybody?
You mentioned experience. For people with little to no experience on resumes or in general, what are like the few things that you look at, most important things that could make you consider that candidate?
That's a good question, because, we've all been there, right? So, even if you're on committees, or your involvement while if you're at college, what you're doing, extracurricular, that might show some leadership, might show, especially if you've been, an officer or on a board, if you volunteer. I mean, there are things that show the initiative you take and the type of experiences that you might have from those types of things that you've done.
Internship positions, right, while you're in school. I mean, again, we all need to pay our bills, so not to knock if you're working at a fast food to pay your bills, that makes sense. Like, those are still skills and abilities for you to be able to be responsible, dependable, but, try to find those summer internship opportunities to get you kind of the experience, or at least to just learn about other businesses, right? I think oftentimes our students will come in just to get an idea of what the insurance industry is all about. And they've never, again, a lot of kids that graduate high school aren't like, I'm going to get a career in insurance. But once they see what our company is about and all the, wide variety of different job opportunities, then they get that interest. And it's good to find that out while you're in college, because then you can kind of, move or cater your classes to what you're more interested in, right? But we have a high school co-op locally with the Frankenmuth High School. And again, it's for us to kind of get young people into our industry to understand what positions are available. So as they prepare to move on outside of high school, what they want to do next. So a lot of businesses want to partner with students and get them that, hands-on experience, kind of a overview of what happens in the industry, so that when you go to graduate, we do look at that experience as interns. Oh, they interned here and they were here, and that does essentially count as experience.
And I think with that, I think everyone has different situations, right? And if maybe you don't have any work experience, or you don't have any committee or internship experience, and it really just is that educational, experience on that resume the last however many years, I think that's okay, right? Like, let's have a conversation about it. I don't think that negatively affects your opportunity by any means, at least from my viewpoint.
If you don't have any work history, your job right now is probably college. You're at the university. In that summary in the beginning, tell that whoever you're interviewing what you're doing, what kind of class you're taking, what's your major. And as you guys said, don't forget clubs, organizations, all that stuff built into a resume anyway. And then one more thing is, a lot of students here may have a part-time position. One of my pet peeves is if someone comes in and says, I've only worked at McDonald's. That McDonald's is a great corporation, that their training is top-notch. When I see somebody working at a fast food restaurant for 4 years to help support their income while they're in college, it not only is it physically demanding, it's mentally draining as well. You're waiting on customers all day. Don't be afraid to share those. You learn a lot of valuable lessons by working in restaurants and fast food restaurants as well.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. Some great insight, great information. I think that we've all taken away. Thank you to the students, both in person and online, who have attended. Enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.